Foreign Minister, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
How important is this moment for you and for your country?
Well, I think it is a significant moment. I mean, we are celebrating the centenary of the birth of an independent state, if you like, in Ireland, which was a painful and violent and difficult birth. But it's one that has many decades later led to the modern, diverse, outward-looking island and Ireland that we see today. And that's something that my generation of politician wants to protect and enhance. And they are connections and relationships that we're celebrating with the visit of Speaker Pelosi to Ireland.
So I'm really interested because you say, you know, this independence, this peace that erupted out of violence, you're very, very committed to protecting. In other words, as we all know, the Good Friday Agreement between Ireland and Northern Ireland and Britain could be at risk because of Brexit. What has Speaker Pelosi been able to say to you that might assuage some of your fears?
So to really understand why that's a problem, you have to understand the Irish peace process and the conflict that led to the need for a peace process. And what I mean by that is that for many years, it was the physical border between Ireland and Northern Ireland that was a source of such friction. People were stopped and inspected by armed soldiers. It became a border where there was a lot of smuggling, there was a lot of gangland terrorism, and it became the symbol of the division of the island of Ireland. And so an all-island economy has developed on the back of that peace process and on the back of joint EU membership that has in many ways reinforced the peace process. So let me give you some examples. Every year, 500,000 lambs from farms in Northern Ireland come south of the border to be slaughtered. Every year, almost 40% of all of the milk produced on Northern Ireland farms comes south of the border to be processed. Every year, tens of thousands of cattle are purchased by farmers and buyers in Northern Ireland south of the border and then taken north to be fattened and slaughtered. And that's just agriculture. And that movement and that commerce has built relationships and has built normal trading environments that has allowed a peace process to bed in and has allowed neighbours to talk to each other as people who trade with each other, as opposed to people who see themselves as coming from a different identity based on nationalism or unionism. So
the underlying message is that absent all of this, you could go back to a lot of friction and there could again be, I don't know, the economic imperative or the trade imperative, what, for war?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we need to be careful with how we describe the tensions around this, but certainly we don't want to see the peace agreement and what has come from that start to be reversed and go backwards.
So this Good Friday marks 21 years since the deal, the peace deal, was signed.
That's right.
First, let me ask you about the United States and Speaker Pelosi, who seems to have told the British government, and indeed Prime Minister May, that Brexit will risk a UK-US so-called bilateral free trade deal. But most certainly, she said, if the Good Friday Agreement is compromised, there's no chance of a UK-USA trade deal, as all the Brexiters insist there will be some instantaneous deal. Does that give you comfort? Does that help? Does that put the wind in your back towards trying to get this resolved if the Brexiters don't believe that somehow there's going to be a magical, immediate US trade deal?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think everybody needs to be realistic about the length of time that it takes to negotiate trade deals. On average, it takes about 7 years. So the complexity of a trade deal between the EU and the US or the UK and the US in the future will take time. But I think people should remember here how the Good Friday Agreement came about and the role of the US in that, the role of people like George Mitchell and others. And so the peace agreement in Ireland, between Britain and Ireland, is owned by the US too. It's part of your investment. It's part of your success in terms of international diplomacy. And the links between Ireland and the US and Britain and the US, you know, they're very, very close bonds, both politically and in terms of history. And so I think what Speaker Pelosi is saying, but also people like Richie Neal and others. It's not just one voice coming from Washington, it's a pretty strong message. And it's very clear that the Good Friday Agreement is valuable. It is an example to the rest of the world about how a peace process can work. how you need to keep working at it even decades later. And I think there would be a lot of concern in Washington if any deal that facilitates the UK leaving the EU were to fundamentally undermine a peace process that the US feels a real ownership and attachment to. And that is why I think you're getting such a clear message from Minister Pelosi. And from our perspective, we're not asking the US to take sides. We ourselves want the closest possible relationship with the UK. They're our closest neighbours, our closest friends, and we want to have a Brexit that they can live with, but that also protects core issues on the island of Ireland. And the fact that that view is shared in Washington, I think, is reassuring.
There's another view that's gaining a lot of currency, and that is, frankly, the breakup of the union. But also, it's happening on this island. There are think tanks, there are universities which are thinking about, a united Ireland, thinking about how and what that would mean. Just give me a sense of where you think this is going.
We have been very careful not to link the two issues of Irish reunification.
You may not be, but people
Brexit.
are.
Yes,
think tanks.
Some are, and one political party in particular is. But what we're trying to do here is find a way forward that everybody can live with. Unionists and nationalists in Northern Ireland, and indeed a British and an Irish government, that provides for a prosperous, optimistic future for Northern Ireland and for the island of Ireland. If instead they crash out with no plan in place to deal with the consequences of that, in my view, the consequences for Northern Ireland are very stark and very negative. And we need to be honest about that. And the medium-term consequence of that, of course, is that if Northern Ireland is suffering, if unemployment is increasing, if the economy is damaged, if there's tension on the border with the Republic of Ireland, well, then nationalism in Northern Ireland will look for more extreme solutions. In other words, if a majority of people in Northern Ireland and in the Republic of Ireland vote for the reunification of Ireland, well, then it happens under the Good Friday Agreement.
Do you believe the extension to the end of October guarantees this deal, a soft Brexit, or a crash out and a hard deal? How do you view it here?
Well, I think a crash out and a hard Brexit is still unlikely because it's madness. Everybody loses if Britain crashes out of the EU. Britain loses the most. Ireland probably is next in line in terms of losing, but the rest of the EU is damaged as well. So if at the end of October Britain crashes out without a deal, it will be an extraordinary failure of politics.
I just want to broaden this a little bit. I hope you don't mind. Ireland is a very popular country. It's on the world stage. It's a very popular country for people to come to. What happens here, is viewed, generally favorably, including the fact that you're trying to get a seat on the Security Council, and also that your Prime Minister is the first openly gay Prime Minister of the Republic and one of the few openly gay leaders in the world today. I wonder whether you can simply talk about how in this 2020 election campaign in the United States, for instance, Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend has just announced, and he would be the first openly gay candidate, if he was successful president of the United States. What do you tell nations about that issue and what it means today?
Well, I'm very proud of our Prime Minister, our Taoiseach in Ireland. He's a good friend of mine. He was also a competitor because we competed for the leadership against each other, but we've become good friends. But in many ways, he is a symbol of what Ireland is today. A modern, diverse, open country that's tolerant of difference, is no longer fazed by issues around sexuality. Our Prime Minister is half Indian, half Irish, so he's mixed race, and yes, he's openly gay, but he is comfortable with that. Ireland as a country is comfortable with that, although many people may see us from afar as a country that is more conservative in terms of religious values and so on. But I think it is a measure of how Ireland has changed, particularly in the last 2 decades. Our attitude to migration, our attitude to foreign nationals making their homes in Ireland. And we want to share that approach to to how we see the world with other parts of the world, because in many ways the story of Ireland, in terms of our global nation, Irish people all over the world, is one of migration and change and tolerance and being part of new communities, whether it's in Buenos Aires or Boston. And I think that has led to not just a positive release in Irish society, if you like, but it's also led to economic development, because so many people want to come here, live here, build global businesses out of Ireland because of that open approach towards difference. And it's something that I and the Prime Minister that I work with will work hard to develop further.
All right. Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.